right, good morning. Today what we're going to do is we're going to go over the safety rules questions that you were supposed to do the day before. You should have already done those questions, and you should have already submitted those to me so that I could give you a grade for them. At this point, what we're going to do is I'm going to go through and give you the right answers on those. Just know that these questions, any of this stuff could be on the test when we get to the test. All right, so make sure that you keep this information inside your notebook. That's where this all should have gone when you answered the questions. It should be inside your notebook. So first one said, is it okay to mix chemicals in the lab that you find, and why? No, you shouldn't. There's always a chance if you take two chemicals and put them together, they can do a chemical reaction. There are some chemicals that can actually blow up. There are also other chemicals, when you put them together, they can also produce gases that are poisonous. So you don't want to just walk into a lab and just, if you find something, go, I wonder what will happen if I put these two things together, because it could be very deadly for anybody that does that. By the way, you might wonder, why are we going through all these lab rules when we may not necessarily have a whole lot of labs? I feel it's important that you guys are familiar and have been introduced to these, because if you continue on in science, you are going to have to do labs later on in life. So I want you to have at least a chance to have been introduced to these at this point. Second one, number 2, if you bring water into class, where should you keep it? Well, the lab area is always considered to be contaminated. It may not be contaminated, but we consider it to be contaminated. So that means if you were to bring water into a classroom, you should always keep that water in the area where you take the notes. Don't take it to the lab area. Third one, how should you act during the lab? You always want to act responsible. Don't mess around. Don't do any horseplay. Don't run around the room, because you can end up with accidents occurring. Number 4, what do you do with extra chemicals after a lab? You always want to ask the teacher what you should do with them. Don't automatically assume that you can just throw them away or throw them down the drain. Some chemicals do have to be disposed of in a proper manner. So ask the teacher, what do I do with the extra chemicals? I will tell you that in my classroom, the stuff that I use, I make sure that everything that we use is safe for the environment. So if you have any extras in my classroom, you can put them down the drain. But I also want to point out that if you take another course, that isn't necessarily true for every single course. Number 5, what do you do with a hot match after using it? A hot match, my garbage cans in my room happen to be plastic. So what I don't want you to do is take a hot match and throw it in a garbage can. What you need to do is take that match, put it underneath water, and after you put it underneath water, then you can take it, then you can throw it in a garbage can, all right, so that you know that it's definitely out and it's not going to start the garbage can on fire. Number 6, what do you do with the gas valve after using it? Gas valves always need to be turned off, and how you tell if they are turned off, they're a little pointy thing that sticks out that you slide the rubber hose on. The gas valve, if it makes an X like this, then that means it's off. When the valve turns this way in line with it, then that means it's on. When you turn it this way, it makes it X again, so therefore it's off. So it actually has 2 positions of off here. This is the only position on. So you want to make sure that you turn it off when you're finished with it. Otherwise, it can fill the room full of gas, and it could actually explode with any little spark that occurs. So you want to make sure that it's turned off. Number 7, if you have been in the classroom, draw a sketch of the room noting where the fire extinguisher, shower, and eye washer is located. Those that are online, obviously you won't have to do this. Those that are in class will. And the idea behind this, when you're in a classroom, you want to know especially where the eye wash station is, because if you get something in your eye, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go like this. You're going to go, oh my God, I can't, got something in my eye, and you're probably not going to open your eyes again, right? Because of having something in your eye. So now you want to know, where is that eye wash station with your eyes closed? So that is one of the reasons why I have those that are in class make a quick sketch of the classroom so that they know exactly where that is. Number 8, what are the 3 things fire needs to burn? Fire actually needs 3 things in order to burn. It needs oxygen. I don't want you to say air, because it's not air. It's actually specifically oxygen that's in the air. It's got to have oxygen. It's got to have a fuel supply in order to burn. And number 3, it's got to have heat in order to burn. Now, having been a fireman, because I was a fireman for 9 years, firemen know that all you got to do is take any one of those 3 things away and a fire will go out. So I'll give you some examples of this, and that is My fire extinguisher, actually, I was like pointing out my fire extinguisher. If you have to use a fire extinguisher, what you actually do is you have to pull the pin. All right, there's a little pin on the top. Pull the pin out, then you can squeeze the handle, and it'll expel the material that's on the inside of it. And then take the hose, and you always point the hose down at the bottom of the fire, all right, because that's where the source is. And what it actually does, a fire extinguisher actually has a gas inside of it. Mine has nitrogen inside of it, which does not burn, and it pushes the oxygen away from the fire and makes it so that it takes away oxygen. Once it takes away the oxygen, then the fire will go out. Now, if you've ever noticed on movies, when somebody gets sprayed with a fire extinguisher, they end up all white. Well, what is that white powder? That white powder is actually supposed to cover up the source so that after you're done shooting the fire extinguisher, then the oxygen in the room will slowly come back. And as it comes back and gets back to the spot where the fire was, well, the fire is hot. It has a source to burn. You give it oxygen back and it'll go and start back on fire possibly. So having that white powder, what that white powder does is it covers it up so that the oxygen hopefully can't get back down to it and it won't restart on fire. Okay. Now, I always like to give 3 examples of things that are real life examples for fire and what you can do. Number 1 is a grease fire on the stove. If you're cooking a hamburger, all right, and the hamburger's got a lot of grease to it, there's always a chance that that grease can actually start on fire and burst into flame. I've had people tell me that, well, what you do is you put baking soda on it, which, yes, it will work. The only issue on that is you have to have lots of baking soda really, really, really quick. Now, my oldest daughter, years ago when she was little, I told her one night, hey, go make some hamburgers for dinner. And she was like, no, I don't want to do that. It might start on fire. And I was like, oh, well, I better teach her about this. So we went in the house and I stood by the stove and I said, all right, let's assume, just pretending, let's assume that the skillet on the stove started on fire. And then I said, okay, Allison, what are you going to do? And she said, well, I go get some baking soda. I said, all right, well, go get it. So she wanders off into the pantry, and she was in there for about 20 seconds or so. And I'm like, hey, Allison, did you find it yet? And she was like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, by this time, the wall behind the stove is on fire. I waited another about 10 seconds. Said, Allison, you find it yet? No. I said, well, that's good, because now the ceiling would be on fire if this was real. And about another 10 seconds later, she finally comes walking out of the pantry, and she's got a half a box of baking soda that she finally found. She goes, here you go. And I said, well, that's great, because by this time, the entire kitchen is on fire. So you're going to have to take that, shake it all around the kitchen and try and get the fire out, which isn't going to work. So you have to have a lot of it, and you got to have it really, really quick. So what's the better way to put it out? Just grab a lid and put the lid over the skillet. Now, what did you just take away from the fire? By putting a lid over it, you took away oxygen. By taking away the oxygen, the fire will go out. Right? So just remember that if you ever have a grease fire, just take a lid and put it over the top of it, and that will put the fire out. Just make sure it's a metal lid, not a Tupperware lid. Tupperware ain't gonna work. My second example is if you take, unfortunately, if a gas valve, if you, for some reason, if it got lit and you had a flamethrower going across the room off the gas valve, how do you put that fire out? Well, all you do is come up behind it and go and turn off the gas valve. What did you just take away from the fire? You took away the source. You took away the source that it was burning, right? And once you take away that source, which was the second thing, the fire will go out. My third one I always like to point out is I used to, again, work as a fireman. What do firemen use in order to put out a house fire? They use water. Why do they use water? One thing is they don't actually drown the fire. They don't come to a person's house that's on fire, close the front door, close all the windows, put the hose in the chimney, and fill the house full of water. Nope. What you actually do is you go into the house and you look for spots that are on fire. And you take the water and you spray water at what are considered to be hot spots in the house. Right? And all the water does is it removes the heat from where the spot is burning. And as you remove that heat, then again, you remove the heat, you still have a source, you still have oxygen, but you don't have the heat, so therefore it won't burn. Right? And you just simply work your way through the house with the fire hose and keep putting out or cooling down the spots that are hot. Right? So remember that fire needs 3 things to burn: oxygen, fuel, and heat. Take away any one of those 3 things and the fire will go out. All right. Number 9, what should you not put in the sinks? The sinks are made for liquids. Don't put things that are solid in the sink. Nothing grosser than going back to the sink after a month of doing stuff and finding all sorts of stuff in there that's decomposing and nasty. Right? So only put liquids in the sink. Anything that's solid goes in the garbage can. If it's hot, make sure that it's been cooled down in water, like the idea of the match we talked about earlier. But otherwise, you only put liquids down the sink. Number 10, when to use goggles. Goggles are used at two specific instances, right? And that is if you're using chemicals, if you're using heat. So if you're using either one of those, then you should be wearing goggles, right? So if you're using chemicals or you're using heat, those are the two times when you should wear goggles. Number 11, why should you never leave a lighted lab burner or hot plate unattended, right? My one example on this one is to point out that if I had two beakers sitting here and I set them right out in front of the camera, I said one of them is hot, one of them is not, right? How would you be able to tell? Well, it is you can't. They both look exactly the same, right? The one that's cold looks exactly the same as the one that's hot. So what I always tell people is, and this is my Dr. Seuss piece, and that is assume something is hot until you know that it's not. Right? So if there's a beaker sitting on the back lab table and right next to it there is a lab burner, right? So could that glassware be hot? Sure it could, because there was a beaker or a hot flame next to it. So let it sit there for 5 minutes. Once you know it's been sitting for 5 minutes, then you know that it's not hot. Now you can grab a hold and pick it up. If you do have to pick something up that's hot, make sure that you put something between you and the glassware, because glassware gets really, really hot and it makes really hot burns that go very deep, very quickly, and they're very painful. I know it from firsthand experience, unfortunately, from having taken college chemistry classes, is accidents do happen. Okay. I also point out that when you do burn yourself, even when you touch something, and this is like anywhere on anything, even after you let go, it still burns because it's warmed up your tissue and it's still burning deeper and deeper into your tissue. What you need to do is you need to get that heat out of there. So the best thing to do is put it underneath cold water. That will remove the heat, therefore the burn won't go any deeper into your skin. Let's see. So again, why not leave a lighted lab burner or hot plate unattended so that you protect other people, so that nobody comes up and gets burnt by grabbing a hold of something that's hot. Therefore, you are able to say, no, don't touch that because that's hot. Number 12, what could happen if you reach over a lab burner? Obviously, now when you reach across it, then all these little hairs that are on the back side of your arm, they won't be there anymore. What you're going to see is you're going to see little black nubs where you just burned all the hair off, and it's not a pleasant sight to see. It doesn't smell very good either. 13, how can you protect yourself from burns? Always assume anything that could be hot, assume that it is hot, right? We kind of just talked about that a second ago. All right, I'm gonna stop there on this video. Now I want you to go to part number 2. I can only make videos so long to get them downloaded, so that's why you're gonna see these part 1, part 2s every so often. So go to part number 2 and we'll finish going over these.